This painting by Marcel Duchamp, titled Tu Me, made in 1918, was the last painting on canvas he ever did in his career. As I listened to a lecture by Laura Hardy at the symposium organized by the KU Leuven last November, I was reminded about Duchamp's enigmatic, mischievous, and playful ways when speculating on the fourth dimension, or what he referred to sometimes as n+1 dimensional. Although it is often commonly assumed that the fourth dimension is the same as time, Duchamp doesn't seem to necessarily think about it this way. Craig Adcock explains the way Duchamp took conceptual models from scientific sources in the early years of the 20th century to suit his artistic purposes. Quotes, Duchamp's notes are masterpieces of humor and innovation, and they should be considered a major work in their own right. The ironic mock seriousness of the notes is one of their greatest charms. It was through this mock seriousness, or as he called it, an irony of affirmation, whose differences from negative irony depended solely on laughter, that Duchamp explored the frontiers of creative endeavor, end of quotes. In the painting Tu Me, Duchamp traced the shadows of two of his ready-mades, the bicycle wheel from 1913 on the left end of the painting, and the hat rack from 1917 on the right end, with the shadow of another everyday object not assigned as a ready-made, a corkscrew. On the bottom left corner, the wooden shapes of the three standard stoppages and some curved lines drawn on the right side of the painting that look like the curves taken from the stoppages superimposed over the shadow of the hat rack. In this detail of the right end of the painting, you can see these curved lines of the stoppages at their left ends are extending from the corners of a thin, transparent, foggy, rectangular plane drawn in perspective here. And a number of lines of colors, something like the codes of color spectrum that one gets when analyzing material with a spectrometer by passing light through a gas and then splitting the light into its various wavelengths with a prism. Here, these lines. These are also drawn in perspective, joining the curves to the shapes of the shadow of the hat rack. The thin, transparent, foggy, rectangular plane seems to be the last, and here's what the spectrometer might looks like. The thin, transparent, foggy, rectangular plane seems to be the last of a series of planes of various colors. Here, this one is the series of planes here, drawn in perspective, going to infinity towards the top left corner of the painting. In between, near the center of the painting, is a tear in the canvas held together with safety pins, like a rent or a bolt of lightning, an actual three-dimensional void that connects the shadows of the corkscrew and the hat rack, and separates the thin rectangular plane connected to the curves on the right with a line of colored planes on the left. A three-dimensional wire bottle cleaner emerges from this tear in the canvas and projects outward from the painting, also projecting an actual shadow depending on the lighting in the room. Duchamp had a sign painter draw a hand pointing to this bottle cleaner or its shadow here. Laura Hardy suggests that the long line of transparent colored planes are like an infinite array of overlapping tracing papers. An English translation of this note, one of the notes that Duchamp made concerning his interest in the fourth dimension, might read something like this. The cast shadow by a figure in fourth dimensions, or our space is a shadow in 3 dimensions. 3-dimensional sections of 4-dimensional figures in a space, analogous with the process of architects who describe the plan of each of the floors of a house. A 4-dimensional figure can be described for each of its floors by 3-dimensional sections. These different floors will be connected each to each by the 4th dimension. Construct all the 3-dimensional states of 4-dimensional figure by determining all the planes or faces of a 3-dimensional figure. In an interview with the French art critic Pierre Caban in 1966, Duchamp explained this a little bit more clearly. Quotes, "Simply I thought of the idea of a projection, of an invisible fourth dimension, something you couldn't see with your eyes. Since I found that one could make a cast shadow from a three-dimensional thing, any object whatsoever, just as the projecting of the sun on the earth makes two dimensions, I thought by simple intellectual analogy, the fourth dimension could project from an object of three dimensions, or put in another way, any three-dimensional object which we see dispassionately is a projection of something four-dimensional, something we're not familiar with. It was a bit of a sophism, but it was possible.